Hello everyone. So today's topic is related to the risk in asset-based lending. There are like 8 to 7 risks that are associated with it, but in this handbook that we were discussing about, it has like 4 risks mentioned in that. So I'm just going to read and understand it very well. What are they actually mean? So the first is the credit risk. It is basically simple and it is actually the most significant and crucial risk associated with ABL, that the borrower may not be strong financially, and it can have like high volatile or seasonal industry and may be experiencing rapid growth. And characteristics of higher default risks such as the high leverage or erratic cash flows or uneven cash flows, limited working capital, and constantly changing collateral pools are common with ABL borrowers. If properly controlled, ABL can result in lower losses in event of default when compared to other types of lending. So this means that if both the side lender and the borrower control it very well, then it has a very lower chance of actually defaults going on. Also, the ABS reliance on the controls and monitoring, however, can pose higher risk when the facility is not properly underwritten, structured, and the administration should be like very well going on. That is actually what does it mean. That can be posed by borrowers inadequate accounting and inventory control systems or poor credit and collection practices, fraud, failure of a major customer, inaccurate collateral valuation, and the lack of marketability, prior liens, and other factors described in this booklet. So these are the basic thoughts around what is the credit risk all about. Second is the operational risk, that the lender have a big team of underwriting and operations, and they should also not do any fault on their side. That is what the operational risk is all about. So it is inherent in banks ABL system, staff and management oversight. A failure of any of these can result in higher losses than other forms of lending. Risk of loss due to operational failure is elevated by inadequate controls for collateral or customer remittances and ineffective monitoring of borrowers' financial conditions. So whenever a lender is actually lending money, it has to take certain judgments on the borrower side, that it has to actually look at the borrower's financials very well to understand their condition and then move forward with that. So this is operational risk. Then you have a compliance risk, that ABL is subject to the same regulatory and compliance as other types. Given the emphasis on the collateral and the types, higher borrower risk profile can be more vulnerable to certain aspects of compliance risk, including the termination of credit facilities, debt liquidation, and the compliance with state and federal laws. So compliance risk is important because it can also lead to the collateral that is the lender is having, it can convert it to liquid, and that the credit facility will stop their lending to the borrower if the compliance is not done properly on the both the sides. It is a responsibility from the borrower and lender, both the sides. And then you have a lender liability. The ABL lender should monitor a borrower's business very closely. In certain cases, the bank may find it necessary to terminate the funding. They can stop the funding and liquidate the collateral because the borrower's financial difficulties. This can make the bank vulnerable to lender liability suits. Courts have sometimes found lenders liable for contributing to the failure of a customer's business, especially when the lender's actions were considered adverse or unreasonable. So, in the historically, it is saying that the courts have sometimes seen that the lender can be fraud also, that they should be able to assess the condition of the borrower financials very well, because it is wrong on that part as well. It is their responsibility also to give the borrower correct direction to what they want to do in the future or what can happen in the future. The state and federal laws, rules, and regulations. Lender should keep abreast of various state and federal laws and regulations that apply to ABL. For example, the bank should understand how laws or environmental contamination could affect a borrower and the value of collateralized trade goods. The borrower's financial position should be compromised if the borrower does not establish and follow the appropriate policies and procedures. Disposal of hazardous materials. As in all commercial lending activities, the bank should aware of safety, health and labor laws and regulations that apply to the borrower and could provide an indirect risk to the bank. The costs associated with the non-compliance with the laws could compromise the borrower's financial capabilities. This is about basically compliance that the both side, the lender should be also aware of the new laws that are coming from the government that can affect the borrower's business, and if the business is affected, then the lender's money that it has already lended, that will also be affected. So both sides should be aware of that. The strategic risk, the able should be compatible with the bank's strategic goals and direction. A bank's management and lending staff should have the knowledge and experience to recognize, assess, mitigate, and monitor the risk unique to ABL. This requires a continuing investment in the personnel and system necessary to maintain a sound and profitable ABL operation. Banks decision to engage in this type of lending without a well-developed understanding of the risk to making the investment require pose significant strategic risk. The strategic risk is that over the time the dynamics of a business changes and the strategies that are used previously may not be relevant today, and then the lender should be aware of that and they should constantly change the system, underwriting and the systems or the personnel who are involved in these investments and the lending activities. They should also keep it updated and have a understanding of this topic. So this is the strategic risk that we talk about. I guess you learned something new. We'll discuss about the few topics again after some time.